I had just placed Clara's old teapot on the stove when I heard the knock. Sharp, insistent, the kind of knock that carried more demand than request. For a moment, I froze, my hand trembling around the handle as though the sound itself had traveled through my bones. It had been 3 months since Aunt Clara passed, and the silence of the house had become familiar, comforting. Like a blanket I wrapped myself in to hide from grief. No one ever came to visit except Emily, my closest friend, and even she had learned to knock gently, respectfully. But this sound was different. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise, and though I didn't yet know who was behind that door, I sensed that life as I had come to know it was about to shift violently. I swallowed hard, set the teapot aside, and forced myself to walk down the narrow hallway toward the front door. When I opened it, my breath caught, and the world tilted under me. Standing on the porch were 2 figures I had once memorized as a child, then buried deep in the locked chest of memory, my parents. My mother, Regina, wore a smirk so sharp it could cut glass, her dark hair streaked now with gray, but her eyes still brimming with that familiar cruelty. My father, Harold, loomed behind her, taller than I remembered, his frame thinner, almost worn down by years I had not been part of. My first instinct was disbelief, followed swiftly by anger that roared up from the pit of my stomach. 15 years. 15 years of silence, of abandonment, of birthdays spent staring at an empty chair. And yet, here they stood, as though no time had passed at all, as if they could just walk back into my life. "Hello, Luna," my mother said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweetness that I remembered too well. She tilted her head, studying me as though I were an object she had once discarded, and now stumbled upon in a shop window. I could barely breathe, the name she gave me twisting in my ears like a cruel joke. My father's expression was harder to read, part shame, part hunger, but not the kind of hunger that longs for reconciliation. No, this was a hunger that made my stomach tighten. My voice cracked when I finally spoke. "Why are you here?" The words tumbled out colder than I had intended, but inside, my chest burned with questions I had spent half my life choking on. They didn't answer at first. Instead, they stepped past me into Clara's house without invitation, their eyes darting to the furniture, the shelves, and the details of a home they had never cared to know. It was my mother who broke the silence with a sentence that struck me like a slap across the face. "We've come for what's ours," she said, her smirk widening. I blinked, confused, before realization struck with the force of thunder. Clara's inheritance, the house, the savings account, everything she had left to me after years of sacrifice and love. My legs went weak, but I held my ground, gripping the edge of the hallway table to steady myself. "Yours?" I repeated, my voice shaking with disbelief. My father's eyes narrowed, and he stepped closer, towering over me the way he used to when I was small, back when his shadow was all I knew. "She was my sister," he growled. "That money should never have gone to you. Blood comes first." His words stabbed deeper than he could ever know. For a long moment I could only stare at them, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst from my chest. Images of Clara filled my mind. Her laughter when I spilled flour all over the kitchen, the way she tucked me in with a kiss when nightmares stole my sleep, the quiet sacrifices she never spoke of, but I saw in the lines of her tired face. She had raised me when they wouldn't, loved me when they couldn't, and now, standing in her house, the people who had abandoned me dared to call themselves entitled to her legacy. Anger surged in me, hot and blinding, but it tangled with grief so raw it threatened to break me in two. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms, and said the words I had once longed to scream as a child, but never had the chance. "You don't belong here." My mother's laugh rang out, sharp and cruel, as though she found my defiance amusing rather than threatening. "Don't play stubborn, Luna. You know very well Clara spoiled you rotten, but you're still just a girl clinging to scraps. That money is ours, not yours. She only kept it away from us out of spite." Her words sliced through me, awakening memories of nights I spent waiting by the window, hoping they would come back, hoping they would choose me. My father's silence was worse. His eyes locked on me, his jaw tight, his whole body radiating resentment. He didn't need to speak. The truth was written in his posture. They hadn't returned for me. They hadn't returned for love, or guilt, or even closure. They had returned for Clara's money. Something inside me hardened. I thought about Clara's funeral, how the small crowd had been made of neighbors, her colleagues, Emily by my side, people who had seen her worth, My parents hadn't even come to say goodbye. Not a flower, not a word, not a tear. And yet, here they stood, demanding what they thought belonged to them. I drew in a shaky breath and shook my head. Clara left it to me. Every penny, every brick of this house. You abandoned me. You don't get to walk back into my life and demand anything. My voice cracked, but the strength behind it was real. For a fleeting second I saw my father flinch, though it was gone in an instant, replaced by a sneer. The silence that followed was suffocating. My parents exchanged a glance, a silent communication I couldn't decipher, but it made my stomach churn with dread. My mother's eyes glittered with a dangerous amusement as she stepped closer, close enough for me to smell the faint perfume she always wore. "We'll see about that," she whispered, her smile darkening. I realized then that their presence wasn't a fleeting storm. It was the beginning of a battle I had never imagined I'd have to fight, and though fear coursed through me, stronger still was the vow rising in my chest. I would not let them take Clara's legacy. Not now. Not ever. That night, after my parents' sudden arrival, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. I lay in Clara's old bed, staring at the ceiling where the faint cracks spread like veins of the house, whispering memories I couldn't silence. The scent of her lavender sachets still lingered in the linen, reminding me of the nights she would sit at the edge of my bed, stroking my hair until my trembling stopped. I wondered what she would say if she had been alive to witness this intrusion. I imagined her fierce, protective tone, how she would have stood between me and Regina without a second thought. My chest tightened as I realized that the woman who had shielded me all my life had left me to face this storm alone. But maybe, in some way, she had prepared me for it all along. Clara had always told me, "Luna, strength isn't in never breaking. It's in piecing yourself back together every time you're shattered." I closed my eyes, and memories began to unravel like an old film reel. I saw myself as a little girl, no older than 5, sitting at the kitchen table of a small apartment, waiting for my mother to return. The clock ticked, and my stomach growled, but the door never opened. When it finally did, it wasn't her. It was Clara, with grocery bags in her arms, breathless from climbing the stairs. She fed me, bathed me, and when I asked where Mommy was, she simply said, "She's busy, sweetheart." I believed her then. I believed the lies for years until I was old enough to understand that busy was just another word for gone. That night replayed vividly in my mind, a reminder of how abandonment had been my inheritance long before Clara gave me her home. The next morning, I found myself clutching a framed photograph of Clara that sat on the mantelpiece. Her warm eyes, forever frozen in that picture, gave me strength I desperately needed. I whispered into the empty room, "Why did you leave me now?" When they came back, my voice cracked, and tears burned down my cheeks, but no answer came, only silence. I thought of the sealed letter Clara had left with the lawyer, a letter she had told me not to read until the time was right. I hadn't touched it yet, afraid of what truths it might carry. But now, with my parents lurking nearby like predators circling prey, I wondered if that letter was the only shield I had left. When I walked into the kitchen, I wasn't surprised to find Regina already seated at the table, sipping from one of Clara's porcelain cups as though it belonged to her. My father stood by the window, his arms crossed, his gaze hard. The audacity of their presence made bile rise in my throat. "We'll be staying a while," my mother announced casually, as if it were her right. I gritted my teeth, fury bubbling in me. "No, you won't. This is my home," she smirked, her eyes narrowing. "Don't be so dramatic, Luna. You're just a child playing house. You don't understand how much responsibility comes with money like this. Let us help you manage it." Her words carried the same venomous condescension I remembered from childhood, when every small accomplishment of mine was dismissed as insignificant. The way she said, "help you manage it," twisted my stomach into knots. I remembered how she used to manage me, turning every mistake into ammunition, every tear into mockery. My father remained silent, but his silence was its own weapon. He had always been the enforcer, the one whose raised hand carried more weight than any of my mother's words. I looked at him, and for a moment I thought I saw something. Hesitation, maybe even shame, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He turned his back to me, staring out the window as if I were too small, too insignificant to acknowledge. Rage coiled in my chest, but beneath it was something worse. Fear. Fear that I was still that little girl who couldn't fight them. To push the fear aside, I forced myself to speak. Clara left everything to me. That was her choice, and nothing you say or do will change that." My voice was firm, though my hands trembled at my sides. My mother laughed, the sound sharp and hollow, like breaking glass. "Oh, Luna, don't be naive. Do you think a will is unshakable? Do you think her words will stand against the truth?" My heart skipped and I frowned. "What truth?" I asked, though a part of me wasn't sure I wanted to know. Her smile widened, cruel and deliberate, as she whispered, "The truth about why she raised you in the first place." My blood ran cold, and the room seemed to tilt, Clara's memory colliding with the venom of her words. I stumbled back, clutching the edge of the counter for balance. "What do you mean?" I demanded, though my voice quivered. My mother leaned closer, her perfume suffocating, her eyes glinting with triumph. "Clara wasn't the saint you think she was. She had her reasons for keeping you, reasons you're too blind to see. If you don't give us what we deserve, we might just have to make sure the world knows those reasons." My father shifted uneasily, but he said nothing, his silence more terrifying than any threat. My hands shook as memories of Clara's kindness clashed violently with Regina's poison. Could there truly be something Clara had hidden from me? That night, I sat at the desk in Clara's study, the sealed letter in front of me. My fingers brushed against the envelope, tracing the familiar handwriting of her name for me. "To my Luna, when you need it most." My chest ached with longing for her voice, her arms, her guidance. For 15 years, Clara had been my everything. Mother, father, protector, friend. But Regina's words echoed relentlessly in my mind, eroding the foundation of everything I thought I knew. Was my mother lying, as she always had? Or was there a darker truth buried beneath Clara's sacrifices, one she had hidden to shield me? My trembling fingers reached for the envelope, knowing that once I opened it, my life might never be the same. The envelope felt heavier than paper should, as though it carried not just Clara's words, but the weight of secrets she had guarded for years. My fingers trembled as I tore it open, and inside I found a neatly folded sheet with her unmistakable handwriting. Just the sight of those curves and loops made my throat tighten. I could almost hear her voice. I held the letter to my chest for a moment, afraid of what truths it might hold, afraid that once I read it, there would be no turning back. Yet curiosity burned hotter than fear. I unfolded the paper, and as my eyes fell on the first line, I knew this was more than a goodbye. It was a confession. "My dearest Luna," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means I am no longer by your side. I pray you never had to face the cruelty of those who abandoned you, but I fear that day would come." My breath hitched, because it was as though Clara had known exactly what was happening. "I raised you not only out of love," she continued, "but because the truth about your parents and me is one you could never have understood as a child." My hands tightened around the paper. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Was Clara about to confirm what Regina had implied? Or was she writing to protect me from more of my mother's venom? The letter revealed pieces of Clara's life I had never heard before. She spoke of her youth, of choices made in desperation, of her younger sister, my mother. "Regina has always resented me," Clara admitted, "because I had something she never learned to embrace, compassion. When you were born, Luna, she was unprepared and unwilling. She saw you not as a gift, but as a burden. I could not bear to watch you waste away in that neglect." My throat closed, and I felt hot tears spill down my cheeks. Clara had taken me in because she saw what I would never admit aloud. My mother never wanted me, but the letter didn't stop there. Clara wrote of conflicts, of nights when my father came to her doorstep demanding money, of how she quietly paid their debts just to keep them from dragging me back into their chaos. "They used you, Luna, not as a daughter, but as a pawn," Clara explained, and my stomach twisted with disgust. "I made the decision to protect you, even if it meant lying. I told you your parents were busy. I told you they loved you, because I wanted you to grow up believing you were worthy of love, even if it wasn't from them." The honesty of her words burned into me, a mixture of pain and relief. Clara had been my shield, but she had also built my childhood on fragile illusions. Halfway through, her tone shifted, and I could almost see her stern eyes staring at me across the paper. "They will come back for you, Luna. Not for your heart, but for what I leave behind. Do not trust them. They will twist truths, whisper poison, and try to make you doubt yourself. But you must remember this. I chose you, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because you were mine to protect. And in my eyes, you will always be my daughter." I clutched the letter so tightly it crumpled at the edges, sobs shaking my shoulders. Clara had known everything, had prepared me for this very battle. But then came the line that nearly stopped my heart. There is something else you must know, and it is why I could never let them have you. The truth about your birth is not what you think. Luna, your father is not the man you call your father. The words blurred as my tears fell, but I forced myself to read them again. My breath caught. My world tilted. For years I had feared my father, hated him, remembered the heavy silence and the raised hand that haunted my childhood, but Clara was saying he wasn't mine at all. My hands shook uncontrollably, and the paper nearly slipped from my grasp. Clara didn't reveal the full truth in that letter. She only hinted, writing, "I promised myself I would tell you when you were old enough, but time betrayed me. All I can say is this: the man you call your father never deserved that title. And the one who truly gave you life, his story is written in another envelope, sealed with the lawyer. If you need it, it will be there." My chest ached with a mix of anger and longing. Who was he? Why had Clara kept this from me until now? And why had she left the final truth hidden away instead of placing it in my hands? I reread the letter until the words etched themselves into me like scars. Every line was a mixture of love and grief, warning and confession. When I finally folded it back, my fingers were numb. I felt both closer to Clara than ever, and yet farther from her, as if she had pulled back a veil and left me standing in the cold shadow of half-truths. The air around me felt heavy with ghosts, with unanswered questions, with the echoes of all the nights she had rocked me to sleep without revealing the secret she carried. The safety I thought I knew had fractured, leaving jagged edges of doubt. That night, when I heard my parents' voices echoing faintly down the hall, I pressed Clara's letter to my chest and whispered to myself, "You chose me. You chose me." It was the only shield I had, and yet the questions it left behind dug deeper than any blade. My mother's threats weren't just empty words. She knew something, and if she was willing to unleash it, then my entire identity could be shattered. My stomach churned as I realized the battle hadn't even begun. Clara's words were both my strength and my torment, and the truth she left buried might just be the key to surviving what was coming. The next morning, I awoke with Clara's letter still clenched in my hands, the creases pressed into my palm like a brand. My head throbbed from a night of restless tossing, haunted by half-whispered secrets, and the shocking revelation that the man I'd called my father wasn't truly mine. I dragged myself to the kitchen where Regina sat at the table, sipping coffee as though she owned the place. She looked too comfortable, too smug, her painted lips curling into a thin smile when she saw me. My stomach tightened. Clara's words echoed in my mind. They will twist truths, whisper poison, and try to make you doubt yourself. Regina didn't bother with pleasantries. "You look terrible," she said, her tone laced with mockery. "Didn't sleep well in your precious aunt's mausoleum?" I ignored the jab and set the letter down on the table, sliding it toward her with steady hands. For a fleeting second, surprise flickered across her face, but it quickly morphed into cold indifference. "So you found her little note," she said, almost yawning. "Let me guess. She painted me as the villain again, didn't she?" My blood heated. She hadn't even read it, and already dismissed Clara's words as lies. "She told me the truth," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "She told me what you did, how you treated me, how you abandoned me." Regina's eyes narrowed, and a harsh laugh escaped her. "Abandoned you? Please, child. You were nothing more than a burden I never asked for. Clara could play saint all she wanted, but don't fool yourself. She didn't save you. She stole you. She made me look weak." Each word stabbed at me, sharper than any blade, but I refused to flinch. I had already read Clara's warnings. I knew Regina would try to poison me against her memory. The tension in the room crackled like electricity. My father, or the man I had thought was my father, stood by the door, silent and watchful. His face revealed nothing, but his clenched jaw told me he was listening. Regina leaned closer, her perfume stifling, her eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "You think you're special because she left you her fortune? Because she scribbled some sentimental lies on paper?" She tilted her head mockingly. "Tell me, Luna, did she tell you who your real father is?" My breath caught, my pulse hammering in my ears. She knew. I forced myself to meet her gaze. "She told me enough," I said, bluffing, hoping to catch her off guard. Regina's lips twitched, and for the first time I saw uncertainty flicker in her eyes. "She never had the courage to tell you, did she?" she whispered, her tone suddenly venomous. "Because the truth would destroy you. The man you've hated all your life isn't even yours, and the one who is Well, let's just say, Clara had her reasons for keeping his name buried. My body went rigid, every muscle screaming for answers. But I couldn't let her see me break. Maybe I don't need his name, I said, though my voice shook. All I need to know is that Clara chose me. You didn't. Regina's face hardened, the mockery vanishing, replaced by something far darker. You think that choice makes you strong? She hissed. It makes you weak. Without us, you'd be nothing. Without me, you wouldn't even exist. Her words dripped with malice, yet beneath them I caught a glimmer of desperation, like she feared losing control of the story. I realized then that her power came not from truth, but from the secrets she dangled like weapons. For a long moment, silence hung between us, broken only by the ticking clock on the wall. My father, no, the man I once thought was, finally spoke, his voice gravelly, almost reluctant. Enough, Regina. His eyes flicked toward me, filled with something I couldn't quite name. Pity, perhaps, or shame. She deserves to know the truth. Regina snapped her head toward him, fury blazing in her expression. Don't you dare! She spat. Not now, not here. But her panic betrayed her. For the first time, I sensed I wasn't powerless. The truth was within reach, and it terrified her more than it terrified me. I rose from my chair, the letter clenched once again in my hand like a shield. Then tell me, I demanded, my voice firm despite the tremor in my chest. Tell me everything, or I'll find out myself. Regina's face twisted with rage, but beneath it, fear. You don't know what you're asking for, she snarled. Some truths can't be untold. Her words echoed through me, chilling me to the bone. But I didn't back down. Clara had trusted me to be strong, and though my knees shook, I lifted my chin and stared into the eyes of the woman who had abandoned me. As I walked away, I felt Regina's glare burning into my back, but I also felt something else. Her fear. That was when I knew Clara had been right all along. The power wasn't in the money, nor in the letter, nor even in the mystery of my birth. The power was in refusing to let them dictate my worth, and for the first time, I understood that confronting them wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming myself, piece by piece, from the lies they had wrapped me in since the day I was born. The next days passed in a haze of tension, every corner of the house feeling smaller under Regina's watchful eyes. She moved through Clara's home like a snake slithering through a garden, touching what wasn't hers, inspecting drawers as though she owned them. I couldn't take it anymore. Clara's letter had hinted at something more, a final message she had entrusted elsewhere, one that would explain everything. My heart ached with urgency. I called Mr. Harris, Clara's longtime lawyer, and begged for an appointment. His voice on the phone was calm, steady, like the voice of someone who already knew truths I hadn't yet earned. When I arrived at his office, I felt small against the tall shelves of leather-bound books and the ticking grandfather clock that seemed to measure out my dread. Mr. Harris greeted me with a somber kindness, offering me a seat before sliding a thick envelope across the polished oak desk. Your aunt instructed me to give you this only if you asked, he said, his eyes heavy with understanding. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, the weight of it far greater than paper should be. I wanted to rip it open immediately, but fear held me back. Mr. Harris leaned forward, folding his hands together. Your aunt loved you fiercely, Luna. She wanted you to have not just her estate, but her truth. She believed it was your right to know who you are. The air seemed to leave my lungs. I traced the envelope's seal, wondering what name or confession lay trapped inside. She warned me your mother might come back, he added carefully. Regina was never content to let go, and she won't stop until she takes what she thinks belongs to her. This letter, it's your shield, but also your burden. His words made my skin prickle. Back in Clara's house, I locked myself in my room before breaking the seal. The letter unfolded in Clara's familiar script, her handwriting steady despite the illness that had stolen her strength. She wrote about sacrifice, about love, about choices she had been forced to make when Regina abandoned me. And then, at the bottom of the second page, came the revelation, my father's name. My vision blurred as I read it again and again. A man I had never met, someone tied to Clara's past more than my mother's, someone who had once begged to keep me but had been pushed away. I sat on the floor, the letter clutched to my chest, my breath shallow. Clara described him as kind, generous, broken by regrets. He had wanted to fight for me, but Regina had used shame and lies to drive him off. My world tilted on its axis. All these years, I had thought myself unwanted, a mistake nobody claimed, but the truth was different. I had been stolen from him, just as Clara had written that I had been stolen from her too. I wasn't a burden. I had been a prize in someone else's cruel war. Tears burned down my cheeks, and anger rose like a tide. I thought of Regina downstairs, smiling smugly, acting as though the house, the money, even my soul belonged to her. I wanted to run to her, shove the letter in her face, and scream that I knew. But Clara's words held me back. Luna, wait. The truth is not a weapon to be thrown in rage. It is a torch to light your way forward. My aunt's wisdom reached across the grave, reminding me to be patient. The day would come to confront Regina, but it wasn't now. Not yet. That night I hid the letter beneath the floorboard under my bed, a place Regina would never think to look. My hands shook as I replaced the wood panel, praying she wouldn't suspect anything. Every creak in the hallway, every click of her heels across the floor sent a spike of fear through me. I couldn't let her know I held Clara's final truth. For the first time, though, my fear was matched by resolve. I had knowledge she didn't, and knowledge was power. Clara had trusted me to be strong, and I would not fail her. But as I lay awake in the dark, I felt the walls close in. Clara's home, once warm and safe, now felt like a battleground. Regina lingered like a storm cloud, waiting for the right moment to strike. And in the silence, I realized something chilling. Clara's letter hadn't just given me my father's name. It had given me a mission. I needed to find him, not just to know who I was, but to reclaim the piece of me that Regina had stolen. And with that thought, I drifted into restless sleep, clutching the hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I once believed. The morning after reading Clara's second letter, I tried to move through the house as if nothing had changed, but something in me had shifted. I no longer felt like the helpless girl Regina had once abandoned. I carried Clara's words like armor, every step echoing with defiance. Still, I had to mask it, to bury the fire within me, because if Regina sensed it too soon, she would rip it away before I had the chance to wield it. Over breakfast, I watched her sip coffee in Clara's china cup, as if she had inherited it by right. Her lips curled into a smirk, and I knew she was probing, waiting for me to slip. "Did you sleep well, Luna?" she asked sweetly, but her eyes were knives. I nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach my face. She was testing me. She had always thrived on breaking down others, but Clara had taught me long ago how to hide my true feelings beneath a calm surface. Still, as her gaze lingered on me, a shiver ran down my spine. She knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to sense that I was no longer entirely in her grip. Regina thrived on control, and she would not tolerate the smallest crack in her illusion of power. That afternoon I caught her rifling through Clara's study, opening drawers and tapping along the shelves as though hunting for something hidden. My chest tightened with panic. Was she looking for the letter? I leaned silently against the doorframe, watching her movements with a mixture of rage and fear. Her fingers lingered over Clara's favorite books, her nails scratching the spines like claws. When she noticed me, she didn't flinch. "Just cleaning," she lied with a smile, the kind of smile that dared me to call her bluff. I said nothing, but inside, my heart screamed. Regina grew bolder in the days that followed. She would question where I had been, what I had touched, who I had spoken to. The house no longer felt like mine. It was as if she had draped it in her poison, suffocating me with suspicion. Every time I passed her, she looked at me too long, her eyes narrowing like she was trying to peel back the skin of my secrets. It was only a matter of time before she acted, before she cornered me. I stayed quiet, waiting, clinging to Clara's words. "The truth is your torch, Luna. Protect it until you are ready to set the world alight." But my silence only provoked her further. One evening, she appeared in my doorway without knocking, leaning against the frame with her arms crossed. "You've been awfully quiet," she said in a voice that dripped with false concern. "Almost like you're hiding something." My hands froze over the book in my lap, though I willed them not to shake. I told her I was grieving Clara, that silence was my way of coping. Her smile deepened, sharp as a blade. Grief makes people do strange things. Sometimes it even makes them lie." And then she left, leaving the words to echo through the dark room like a curse. That night I barely slept. I could hear her footsteps pacing the hallway, stopping outside my door longer than necessary. The floor creaked as if she pressed her ear against the wood, listening for secrets that might slip out in whispers. I clutched Clara's letter beneath the floorboard, praying she wouldn't think to look there. My mind replayed every moment, every glance, every word Clara had written. If Regina discovered the truth before I was ready, she would twist it, destroy it, and me along with it. I knew then that I had to move quickly. Waiting was no longer safe. The next morning I made my decision. I would find my father. Clara had left me his name, and that was enough to begin. If I could reach him, I would no longer be at Regina's mercy. I would have someone else. Someone tied to me not by greed, but by blood. The thought terrified me as much as it gave me hope. What if he had moved on? What if he wanted nothing to do with me? But Clara believed he had loved me once, and I chose to cling to that belief. It was my lifeline. As I began searching through Clara's old files for any clue that might lead me to him, I heard Regina's voice downstairs, sharper than usual, speaking on the phone. I strained to listen. I know she's hiding something. No, I don't care what it takes. I'll find it. The words sent ice through my veins. She wasn't just suspicious, she was determined, and determination, in Regina's hands, was dangerous. I knew then that my time was running out. I had to act before she uncovered the truth buried beneath the floorboards and inside my heart. The war Clara had warned me about had already begun. I woke with the determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. Clara's letter still burned in my chest, urging me forward, demanding that I uncover the truth she had safeguarded for so long. My father was not just a name in her words. He was a lifeline, a chance to reclaim what Regina had stolen from me. I started with Clara's desk, carefully pulling out folders of old correspondence, searching for scraps of information that might connect me to him. I felt like an intruder in my own home, moving quickly and quietly, as though every creak of the floorboards might betray me. And all the while, Regina's presence lingered like smoke seeping under the door, making me question how long I could hide this desperate search. Hours passed before I found it, an old envelope tucked between pages of Clara's gardening journal. My breath caught when I saw the handwriting, neater, sharper than Clara's, signed with the name, Samuel Green. My fingers trembled as I pulled out the letter. It was dated nearly 16 years ago, before my parents had disappeared from my life. Samuel had written of love, of regret, of longing to meet me but being shut out by her, though he never named who had kept him away. My throat tightened. Was her my mother? Was Regina the wall that had kept me from knowing my father all along? I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling the truth pulsing beneath the ink. I wanted to run straight into the world with the letter clutched in my hand, to track him down immediately, but fear stopped me. What if he had changed, or worse? What if he had no interest in me now? My life had been shaped by abandonment. I had learned early on not to expect anyone to stay, yet Clara had believed in him, and that was enough for me to try. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into my pocket. The next step was finding him, but I had no idea where to start. My only weapon was persistence, and persistence had carried me through every storm Regina had tried to bury me under. That evening, I sat across from Regina at dinner, the weight of Samuel's letter hidden in my pocket. She watched me too intently, her eyes glinting with a predator's patience. Every bite of food felt like swallowing stones under her scrutiny. "You seem distracted," she said softly, though her tone carried accusation. "Perhaps you've found something that keeps your mind so occupied." I forced a laugh, telling her I had simply been sorting through Clara's old things, that grief was a strange companion. But her gaze didn't waver, and I knew she didn't believe me. Regina's silence was more dangerous than her words. It meant she was plotting. After dinner, I locked myself in Clara's study and turned on the old computer she had left behind. The machine whirred to life slowly, like waking from a long sleep. I typed Samuel's name into every database and directory I could find, my heart pounding with each hit that revealed nothing useful. Minutes stretched into hours, frustration boiling inside me. Just when I was about to give up, one result glimmered with possibility. A Samuel Green listed as a lecturer at a university 2 towns away. My heart leapt into my throat. Could it really be him? Or was fate cruel enough to dangle a stranger in front of me? Sleep became impossible after that discovery. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every line of his old letter in my mind. What would I even say if I found him? Would he see my face and recognize himself in me? Or would he turn away, unwilling to acknowledge the years we had lost? Questions spun in my head like a storm. But beneath it all was the tiniest flame of hope, the kind I had never allowed myself to feel before. If this was truly my father, then I wasn't as alone as Regina wanted me to believe. The next day, I planned my escape. I knew Regina wouldn't allow me to leave the house without interrogation, so I pretended to be heading to the library in town. My hands shook as I packed a small bag, slipping Samuel's letter inside as proof of my journey. My heart raced with every step toward the door, waiting for her voice to call me back, but silence greeted me. The air outside felt different, freer, like I had broken through invisible chains. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was moving toward something that belonged to me. But Regina wasn't blind. As I reached the gate, her voice cut through the air like a whip. "Going somewhere, Luna?" I froze, the blood draining from my face. She stood at the top of the porch steps, her arms crossed, her eyes dark with suspicion. My carefully woven excuse tangled on my tongue, useless against her stare. She descended slowly, each step deliberate, like a hunter closing in on its prey. "You know," she said, her voice low and measured, "secrets never stay buried for long." My pulse roared in my ears. She knew, maybe not everything, but enough to make this a race between her and me, and I couldn't afford to lose. The morning after Regina's confrontation, I didn't wait for courage to come. I simply moved. I slipped out of the house before dawn, the letter burning against my chest, my breath fogging in the cold air as I walked to the station. Every step away from Clara's house felt like treason, like I was abandoning her memory, but I knew deep inside she wanted this for me. The train rattled along the tracks, carrying me toward a man I had only known through ink and silence. My fingers tightened around the seat edge as questions clawed at me. What if he denied me? What if Regina was already one step ahead? Fear gnawed at me, but hope pushed me forward. When I arrived at the university town, the campus buzzed with life. Students laughing, professors rushing with stacks of papers, the smell of coffee drifting through the air. It all felt foreign, like a world that had always been locked to me. I followed the map to the humanities building, my heart pounding so loudly it nearly drowned out the sounds of chatter. The name Samuel Green was on the door of an office at the far end of the hall. My legs trembled as I raised my hand to knock, every nerve screaming with anticipation. The door opened before I could touch it. A man stood there, graying at the temples, his eyes a striking shade of hazel that caught the light. For a moment, I couldn't breathe because I saw myself in him. My cheekbones, my jawline, even the tilt of his brow mirrored mine. His gaze lingered on me with curiosity, then confusion, as though he were looking at a ghost he couldn't place. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice steady but guarded. My lips quivered before I could form words. I think you're my father," I whispered, and the world seemed to still around us. Samuel's expression shifted instantly, confusion melting into something rawer. Shock, grief, recognition. He opened the door wider, ushering me inside as if the hallway wasn't a safe place for truths of this size. I stepped into his office, crowded with books, papers, and photographs of landscapes I didn't recognize. He sank into his chair, his eyes never leaving me. "What did you say?" he asked, almost afraid of the answer. I pulled out Clara's letter with trembling hands, setting it before him like an offering. "Clara kept this," I said. "She told me the truth before she died. I'm your daughter." His hands shook as he picked up the letter, his breath catching as he read the words written years ago. Tears welled in his eyes before he could finish reading. "Clara, she promised me she'd protect you," he murmured, pressing the letter to his chest. "Your mother?" He stopped abruptly, pain flickering across his face. "She never let me near you. She told me you'd be better off without me." His voice broke, and in that moment I felt the same ache he carried, the years of absence carved into both our lives. "I tried, Luna. I tried so many times to find you, but Regina, she always made sure the door was closed." Hearing her name on his lips was confirmation of my worst fear. Regina had been the gatekeeper of my life all along. I wanted to scream, to weep, to demand why no one had fought harder for me. But when Samuel's hand reached across the desk, trembling and tentative, something inside me softened. I placed my hand in his, and the warmth of his touch broke the dam in my chest. For the first time in years, I let myself cry openly, no longer ashamed of the longing I had buried deep. He squeezed my hand, whispering apologies that could never undo the past, but still carried the weight of love I had yearned for. In his embrace, I wasn't invisible. I was his daughter. We talked for hours, the sun shifting across the office until shadows stretched long. He told me about his life, about the marriage that had crumbled when my mother's bitterness consumed her, about the letters he had written but never sent, convinced Regina would intercept them. He confessed he had thought of me every birthday, every holiday, wondering if I was safe, if I was loved. Each word felt like stitching to a wound I had thought would never heal. For the first time, I saw a version of my life where I had been wanted all along, but joy was laced with dread. As I spoke about Clara's passing, about Regina's sudden claim to my inheritance, Samuel's face darkened. "That woman is dangerous," he said firmly, his voice carrying a weight of certainty. "She always wanted what wasn't hers, and if she's after Clara's estate, she won't stop until she breaks you." His warning sent a chill down my spine, because I already knew it was true. Regina's eyes had told me as much every time she looked at me. Samuel placed his hand over mine again. "You're not alone anymore, Luna. Whatever she tries, she'll face me too." We left the office together, walking through the campus side by side. For the first time, I didn't feel like a shadow drifting through the world. I felt anchored, tethered to someone who shared my blood and my pain. Students glanced at us curiously, some smiling at the strange sight of two people so clearly connected by resemblance. I clung to those small moments, letting them fill the hollowness inside me. But beneath the warmth, unease gnawed at me, because I knew Regina wasn't going to let me slip away quietly. That evening, I stayed at a small inn near the station, Samuel promising to meet me the next day to begin discussing how we could fight Regina legally. Alone in the quiet room, I stared at the ceiling, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me. Yet peace didn't come. Every creak of the building made me flinch. Every passing footstep outside my door made my stomach knot. Regina had a way of appearing where she wasn't wanted, of poisoning the air with her presence. I didn't know how far her reach extended, but I feared I was about to find out. The next morning, as I packed my bag to meet Samuel again, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Slipped under the door was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting elegant, sharp, unmistakable. "You can run, Luna, but you can't hide from me. Everything Clara left will be mine in the end." My hands shook violently as I crumpled the note, bile rising in my throat. Regina knew where I was. She had followed me. And this time, the game was no longer just about inheritance. It was about survival. When I saw the note under the door, my entire body went rigid with terror. Regina's words felt like knives pressing into my skin. "You can run, Luna, but you can't hide." I wanted to believe she was bluffing, that she couldn't possibly know exactly where I was, but the elegance of her handwriting shattered that hope. She had been there. She had watched. My heart thudded so violently it made my vision blur. For a moment, I wondered if I should run again, but the truth was clear. Running had never saved me. She would always find me unless I stopped her. When I met Samuel later that morning, I showed him the note. His face hardened, the softness I'd seen the day before vanishing behind a shield of fury. "She hasn't changed," he muttered, almost to himself. "I knew she was capable of cruelty, but to stalk you like this, she's crossed every line." He clenched the paper in his fist, his knuckles whitening, and I realized he wasn't just angry, he was afraid. "We have to go to the authorities," he said, but doubt gnawed at me. Regina had a way of twisting every truth, making herself the victim while I looked like the unstable one. Still, I let him lead me to the police station. We sat across from an officer, Samuel explaining everything. The inheritance, Regina's harassment, the note. The officer nodded gravely, jotting down details, but the doubt I feared lingered in his eyes. "Do you have proof she delivered this?" he asked. My stomach sank, because of course I didn't. Regina never left fingerprints, never gave people the satisfaction of catching her red-handed. It was always shadows and whispers. The officer promised to look into it, but I knew the weight of those words. It meant waiting until she did something far worse. We left the station, frustration simmering between us. Samuel tried to reassure me, but his words couldn't touch the dread spiraling in my chest. I felt watched, every passerby a potential spy, every shadow another trap. When we reached his car, I froze, because leaning casually against it was Regina herself. She looked immaculate as ever, her dark hair pulled back, her lips curled into that cruel smile I'd memorized over the years. "Luna," she said sweetly, as though she were greeting a lost child. "And Samuel, how touching, this little reunion." Samuel stiffened, stepping protectively in front of me, but Regina's eyes slid past him like he wasn't even there. "You always were dramatic," she sneered. "Pretending to be the noble savior when all you ever did was leave." Samuel's jaw tightened, his voice low and dangerous. "You kept her from me. You poisoned everything." But Regina laughed, the sound cold and sharp. "No, Samuel. I did what was necessary. She was mine to shape, mine to raise, mine to use. And now she's mine to control." Her gaze finally locked on me, and I felt the venom of her possession, the way she saw me not as a person, but as property. I wanted to scream, to tear away from her influence, but the power she held over me was built on years of silence and fear. Samuel's hand on my shoulder grounded me, pulling me back from the brink. "You're wrong," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "I'm not yours. I never was. Clara chose me because you destroyed everything you touched, and you can't change that with your lies." Regina's smile faltered, a flicker of rage seeping through her mask. She stepped closer, her perfume suffocating, her shadow swallowing mine. "You think a letter and a few sob stories will save you?" she hissed, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "I can make you disappear, Luna, just like your father almost disappeared. No one will believe you when I'm finished." Her threat coiled around me like a snake, squeezing the air from my lungs. Samuel stepped forward, his voice firm, his presence a shield. "Try it, Regina. Touch her, and I will destroy you. You've hidden behind lies for too long. The truth is coming out whether you like it or not." His defiance was a spark in the darkness, but I knew sparks could start fires. Regina's face twisted, her composure cracking, and for the first time I saw something beneath her cruelty: fear. She didn't expect resistance, not from me, and certainly not from Samuel. "You don't know what you're doing," she snapped, her voice rising. People on the street began to glance our way. Curiosity piqued. "You'll regret this, both of you." With that, she turned sharply, her heels clicking against the pavement as she disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind the bitter stench of her presence and the echo of her threat. I stood frozen, shaking, my body buzzing with adrenaline. Samuel's arm wrapped around me, steadying me as he guided me back into the car. "She's unraveling," he said quietly. "That's when she's most dangerous." His words struck me like a warning bell. I knew this wasn't over. Regina had never backed down from anything, but a strange resolve grew inside me. For the first time, she wasn't the only one holding the cards. I had Samuel, I had Clara's letter, and I had my voice. That night, we stayed together in his home. It was small but warm, filled with books and photographs of places he had loved, fragments of a life I had been denied. We sat by the fire, the glow softening the hard edges of the day. Samuel told me more about his past, about how he had fought Regina in court once before and lost, how he had learned the hard way that the truth wasn't always enough. But he also told me he had never stopped believing that someday the truth would find a way to break through. His words were a balm to my weary heart, even as fear still gnawed at me. As I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized something with chilling clarity. Regina wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for control, for power, for the twisted satisfaction of owning me even in Clara's absence. And the only way to stop her was to strip that power from her completely, to expose her for who she really was. Tomorrow, Samuel and I would go back to the lawyers, back to the courts, back into the storm. I knew it would be brutal, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't facing it alone. The morning air was heavy with anticipation, each breath a reminder that today would change everything. Samuel and I arrived at the law office, files and letters clutched tightly in our hands. The walls seemed to close in, every tick of the clock echoing the weight of the confrontation ahead. I could feel Regina's presence already, though she wasn't there yet, like a shadow looming over every step we took. My fingers trembled, my stomach roiling with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. This was it, the moment when years of deceit, abuse, and silence would be forced into the light. Regina entered the courtroom with her usual elegance, her eyes sweeping across the room, stopping on me with a venomous glare that promised destruction. She was the same woman who had haunted my childhood, the woman who had tried to erase my existence, and yet today, she would be exposed. My heart pounded as she strutted to her seat, her lawyers whispering in her ear. Samuel stood beside me, his hand brushing mine lightly, a silent reminder that I was not alone. I drew a deep breath, clutching the envelope containing Clara's final letter, the proof of Regina's manipulations, and the inheritance she had no right to claim. The judge called the court to order, and the room fell silent, all eyes turning toward us. My palms were slick with sweat, but I forced myself to stand tall. Samuel whispered, "You're ready, Luna. Clara gave you everything you need." I nodded, my throat tight, and handed the envelope to the clerk. As the papers were distributed, Regina's expression faltered for the first time that day. Her confidence, the armor she had worn for so long, began to crack as she realized the tide was turning. The room seemed to hold its breath, the tension palpable, each heartbeat echoing in my ears. When the letter was read aloud, a hush fell over the room. Clara's words spilled into the air, detailing her reasons for leaving me everything, exposing Regina's relentless cruelty and obsession with control. She described how Regina had manipulated every aspect of my life, blocked my father's attempts to connect with me, and tried to poison the inheritance to ensure her victory. The words were sharp, precise, and undeniable. Regina's face went pale as the room absorbed the truth, her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes darting around for some escape. There was none. The lawyers turned to the judge, citing the evidence and Clara's clear instructions. Regina tried to speak, to argue, to twist the facts, but every attempt was dismantled by the irrefutable truth. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me as I watched her panic. For the first time, she was powerless. She was no longer the puppet master of my life. She was just a woman exposed. Samuel squeezed my hand, and I realized that our victory wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my life, my identity, and the dignity that had been stolen from me. Regina finally rose, her face twisted with rage, but the judge's gavel came down firmly. "The court finds in favor of the rightful heir, Luna Green," the judge declared. Gasps and whispers rippled through the room. Regina's mouth opened, closed, opened again, but no sound came out. Her lawyers tried to intervene, but even they knew the battle was lost. She slumped into her seat, defeated, her power stripped away, her lies exposed for all to see. I felt a mixture of pity and triumph. This was not just a victory over her. It was the end of years of fear and manipulation. After the court, Samuel and I walked out into the sunlight, the weight of the past lifting with each step. I felt tears streaming down my face, a mixture of relief, joy, and sorrow for the years I had lost. Samuel wrapped his arm around me, holding me steady as we took in the moment. The world felt different, brighter, and safer, filled with the possibility of a life I had never dared to imagine. I finally understood that the scars I carried were not signs of weakness. They were proof of survival, of resilience, of a heart strong enough to endure. Later, I returned to Clara's home, sitting in the room where her presence still lingered. I read her letter one last time, committing every word to memory, feeling her love and guidance as if she were still there beside me. I knew that Regina could never touch me again, that the inheritance, the legacy, and the truth were mine. For the first time, I could breathe fully, without fear, without doubt. The world was vast and open, and for the first time it felt like mine to explore, to claim, to live in freedom. As the sun set, painting the sky in golds and pinks, I made a silent promise to Clara and to myself. I would honor her memory, protect the people I loved, and live boldly, unapologetically. No one would ever take that from me again. And with Samuel by my side, the future felt limitless. If you've been moved by my journey, if my story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. Your support helps me share these stories and keep the memories of those who fought for justice alive.